shows you the cover and stuff like that. Okay. This week is Parshas Yisro. Obviously, a very seminal Parsha, historically speaking. This is the Parsha of Kabbalah Torah. This is the Parsha that Hashem gives the Torah, the Jewish people receive the Torah. We don't say Nasav and Nishma until next week's Parsha, but this is when Hashem at least gives the Ten Commandments, right? And there's a lot of things that we could focus on and speak about. First of all, why it mentions the very first mitzvah, the fundamental of fundamentals, is that I'm the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. And they asked the question, why does it mention that you took us out of Egypt, especially since the Jewish people could say, yeah, but you put us there anyhow. So don't put us there, don't take us out, and we'll call it a day. But God mentions it, and the different explanations as to why that's the case. I actually had a diagram I wanted to share today, but because of technical difficulties, I'm on my phone instead, and I can't do that. Either we'll put it up later on, or again, if you want to see it or have a copy of it, you can just write me. I'll be happy to send it to you. It's a PDF file. We'll cover the material as we talk, but it would have been easier to see at the same time. The point is like this, okay, that the mitzvah itself essentially says that, and the way to fulfill the mitzvah, and you have to fulfill this mitzvah because it is the foundation of everything else, that all the other mitzvahs and everything we do and everything we are, and that is that to recognize the fact that God made creation. He's the one who created it. He's the one who sustains it, maintains it, runs it, and is involved in every level at all times. With the moment he decides to stop willing something, it ceases to exist, just like that. And whether he seems a billion miles away or not, doesn't make a difference. He's right here all the time. Our soul is a piece of his light. And the reason why he mentions leaving Mitzrayim, being safe in Mitzrayim, even though he was the one who brought us down there, is because of the fact it was for our own good. It's like the same thing that if a child, God forbid, broke his leg and it didn't heal properly, and they have to go to the surgeon, and he has to break the leg once again, and the father mentions that I'm the one who brought you to the surgeon to break your leg. Well, thanks a lot. Well, it was for his good. You don't say no thank you because you need to set that leg, get it right. So the same thing is true of the Jewish people. We had to go down to Mitzrayim. It's the place we became a nation. It was all for our good. As we mentioned before in the past, even though Moshe Rabbeinu himself comes back to God and says, how could you do this evil to the Jewish people? Ever since you sent me down to Mitzrayim, you've only done bad to them. And he learns what Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov always knew and lived by, and that we're all supposed to live by, and that God can't do any bad. God can't do any evil, which of course freaks people out to hear that, because how can you say anything like that? Look at the Holocaust, look at the pogroms, look at the Crusades. Either God runs the show or he doesn't run the show. If he doesn't run the show, so fine. Then, like those who would like to believe that God's not involved in everyday life to explain why bad things happen to good people, then you can basically do what you want, and it does not really, because you still could be culpable even if God doesn't get involved in everyday life. There is a cheshbon, an accounting on the day of judgment later on, right? But the main point is that even though if it looks like it's bad, it's only because of our perception, the way that we see it. But it's not really the reality, because everything by definition is good. The amazing thing is how something so bad can actually be so good. In fact, I just saw in a sefer this week, once again, talking about this very topic in terms of the final redemption from the Vilna Gaon, and he mentions the fact that the worse the bad is, the more the good it's leading to. So it's like the same thing. If you only want to train for the local Olympics, so to speak, just the community Olympics that they have once a year, so you're not going to be up against the best runners in the world, the best athletes in the world. So therefore, there's a limit to how much you have to train to actually compete. If you want to go to the nationals, then you're going to be seeing more professional athletes, people who are in much better shape than just locally, in which case you have to train even more. If you want to go to the Olympics, and that is like the ones that come every 4 years internationally, then you're going to meet the best people in the entire world, and therefore you have to train even more. So the same thing is true. If you want the ultimate good in life, sometimes we have to go through what seems to be like the ultimate bad. But even the ultimate bad is not the bad. It just seems that it hurts, it's painful, and it's, even Eov, even though the book of Job ends on a positive note because of the fact that he gets a new family, right? He lost his family, he lost everything, and he gets back. He gets his wealth back. He gets everything back in the end. But you can't forget about the fact that he lost his first wife, and he lost his first children, and he lost all the money that he once earned. And even though the truth is, with money, you can kind of replace it, but people often remember what it was like during that difficult period when they didn't have anything. That they once had it, they lost it, and it doesn't get erased completely by the fact that they get it back later on. The point, being that he still had to suffer. He still had to go through what he went through in the end, even though he got back so much. So that's life in this world, and the condition is one that we don't understand and certainly always hope for the best. We'd like to basically have a comfortable life. Why not? That's the way the body is. It's just very hard to get around that. And it's not so much that you can block it out. It's not so much you can make yourself immune to the pain and the suffering, because things happen in this world that are painful. They might not be bad, they might not be evil, but they are painful. Pain is a part of life. We spend a lot of time running away from it and trying to avoid it, but it is a part of life. And coping with it and how you come out of it, how you deal with it, especially in terms of your relationship with Hashem, that is the Nisayon. That is the test that we all go through. But anyhow, that's a different discussion. The main thing is that going down to Egypt was for the benefit of the Jewish people. It was part of a much bigger picture. And this is what the Lashon speaks about, how this even goes back to pre-creation, that what going down to Egypt not only rectified and the tikkun for thousands of years of history until that point in time, going back to Adam Rishon, but even was tied back to pre-creation events like what's called Kabbalistically Shviras HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels. It was very, very primordial. It's just that the Torah doesn't talk about that, nor do the rabbis in yeshiva talk about that, or even yeshiva gedolah so much. In the yeshivas mekubalim, this is standard fare. For those who learn the Zohar inside and spend the time to learn Kabbalah through and through, this we're talking about, this is everyday learning. But the rest of the world doesn't know that. And if you don't know that, it's very hard to be able to appreciate, because for the most part, it's like, life, even for example, your own body works the same way. If you're feeling okay, everything is more or less in balance, your heart's working fine, your breathing is fine, you're feeling fine, you're not sick. So then you forget about everything running your body. It's like your body's just a shell and somehow lives and exists without anything inside of it. But it does, of course, have everything inside of it. It's got all these networks of blood vessels and arteries and veins and nerves and everything you can possibly imagine, and then some. It's just absolutely mind-boggling how much is inside your body to keep it going and functioning what we call normally. But the moment that you don't feel well, the moment that, God forbid, a person gets something even serious, there's a breakdown in the body, and as a result of that, the person becomes very, very ill. So all of a sudden, you're forced to become aware of the inner workings of your body and to learn things and learn technologies or terminologies. I mean, today, once upon a time, all you could do was go to the doctor and listen to his explanation. Today, the first thing that we all do is go online and we look up what we're feeling. We see the symptoms, and how many people, it drives doctors nuts, by the way, but how many people come in already self-diagnosed or don't even come at all because they're self-diagnosed. There's obviously so much more, and they usually put a little disclaimer on the page saying, don't decide for yourself. This is just some back information, but still, you're much more educated about what's going on in your body, and you become more aware of it. It goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And then maybe even if you recover, you might change your eating habits because you learned about this, you learned about that. The same thing is true of creation. Life goes on from day to day to day. There's politics all the time, and people just judge reality based upon what they see and what they smell and what they hear, without knowing what's going on below the surface. And until that below the surface starts to surface and come and present itself, and all of a sudden things don't make sense, like a Holocaust. The Holocaust was Kabbalah, in a sense, coming to the surface. Every once in a while, the deeper meaning and the deeper aspects of history, creation, the deeper ideas behind the ideas, even a medrash, for example. How many times have you ever looked at a medrash I said, well, I didn't know that before. I mean, this is incredible. This background information is crucial. Why doesn't anyone mention this or talk about this? I need to know this. I thought I understood this situation. It turns out I don't, because there's all this information that gives this background. And that's why there's a mitzvah dalachas chus, to judge a person to the side of merit. And the Gemara brings in examples that seem so far-fetched that you say to yourself, boy, if I had seen that, I would have for sure assumed the worst about the person. And the Gemara then shows us how, no, everything was okay. It just seemed that way. Just seemed that bad. Just seemed that wrong. And so you have to judge a person to the side of merit. But the same is true of God. You have to judge God to the side of merit. Moshe didn't do that. And he was censured for that. When he came back, and then at Parsha Shmos, and God said to him, boy, they don't make him like they used to. You know, you're witnessing the redemption unfold before your very eyes, and you're fetching. Right? Then Moshe, he learns later on. He sees the difference. And of course, he becomes the teacher, the great teacher. But that was part of his training. That was part of what he had to go through to be the great leader of the Jewish people, not just in his generation, but the Gemara says, and Kabbalah says, all through history. Every single Torah thought and word, whether it's new, whether it's old, comes through Moshe Rabbeinu. And he comes back in every generation. His soul comes back in every generation. It reincarnates into somebody in every generation for the sake of doing tikkun to the world that goes back to the very beginning. So that's why God mentions who took you out of Mitzrayim. And even though I put you there, because putting you there was the best thing for you, not for me, because God needs nothing. He's not entertained by us. He just wants to give us good. So if he does that, if he puts us down there, especially if we didn't do anything specifically to warrant that, then for sure it has to be for our good, even though it looks so bad. And that's the first mitzvah. But interesting enough, it's not the only part of the mitzvah. That's the obvious part of the mitzvah, but the less obvious part is very, very relevant to everyone today, especially, aside from the other part, but it's not one that people think about. The Gemara says in Shabbos on Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph, this I would have this on the drawing that you could see and read for yourself, so I'm going to have to paraphrase in the meantime. But the Gemara says that when a person stands before God on their final day of judgment, they ask the person 6 questions. There's 6 questions on the exam. You know, it's like, well, it sounds like it's easier because there's only 6, but the truth is, usually when there's only 6, it means they're hard. When there's 50, it means that, you know, each one is like a chipping away at the information. But 6 main questions. One, the first question, right, kind of makes sense, especially, you know, once you understand the basis of it. But the Gemara says the first question they ask you is, did you deal faithfully in business, or did you cheat? Right? Were you honest in business? And why is that so important? Well, of course, society depends upon that. Once you start cheating in business, and that's the ultimate corruption in a society. That you can't trust anybody. Everything is you know, you just live with complete paranoia. You want to know that you're getting what you think you're getting, and you're giving what you're giving. But it's more than that, because a person cheats when it comes to parnasa because they don't trust God. God says, this is what the man was all about. The whole point of the man was, I give a person the portion they need to survive one way or another way. That's why the rabbis can say, Ezu Asher, Asmech Bechelka, who's a well, they translate as a wealthy person, but really who's a content person, someone who's happy with their portion. And of course, people, well, if I would just get my portion, I'd be happy with it. No, you have your, that's the whole point. Whatever portion you have, it's not like God says, it's on back order. Don't worry, hang in there a little bit longer. We'll get it to you soon. I know you're missing it, but no, everything, he can give it to you on the spot, whatever you need. I've seen countless times Yeshua's in record time. You know, you would think that given the rules of the world and finances and economics, that it just, you know, that you can only accomplish things in a certain amount of time. And yet somehow Kosh Baruch Hu has ways to help people out and bring them what they need, even against logic, because he runs the world. And he can, and not just that, but he also knows in advance what's going to be necessary. So he can also prepare the way in advance, even though you can't see how he's doing that, he of course knows. And that sort of means that the refuah comes before the makya, that the cure comes before the illness, because the Kodesh Baruch Hu is prepared for all of that. But he knows the future too. He's above time. So you have to deal faithfully in business, because that's not just being nice to the next guy and keeping society stable, but it's also expressing your trust in God to take care of your needs. And you might think you need something, but if you don't have it, his way of saying you don't, or not yet. You may want it, and he may say no, because it's not good for you. He's not stingy. That's one thing for sure. And he can give you whatever he wants to give you. That's not going to affect him. So by dealing faithfully in business, that's how we also express trust in God. The second thing it says, eating b'Torah, that you established fixed times for Torah, because when it comes to learning, if you don't stick to your schedule of learning, it's very easy to lose it. I remember one year when I was in Toronto, at a chavrusa before davening. In those days, especially in the wintertime, the sun rises very late, even like 8 o'clock in the morning, so still dark. It's 7 in the morning, cold outside, and we would get there pretty much on time. Each of us, weeks, months, a long time. We're on time. And then one day he got sick, and he missed 1 day, missed 2 days in the end, which of course is understandable. But the moment he did that, and then there was and I didn't know if he was coming the third day, possibly yes, maybe no. So I stayed in bed a little bit later, a little bit longer. And as a result of that, I got to shul, and he was sitting there waiting there for me, because he did come. He pushed himself, and I came late that day. And then because I was late, the chavrusa fell apart. It didn't happen immediately overnight, but after a while, it was amazing. Once we broke that schedule, and you hear countless stories like that in the Torah world. Wives know that there are certain times not to, unless it's important, to interfere with their husband's schedule. And husbands know that when they have certain times to learn Torah, that they have to stick. It's kadosh, it's holy. So much so that Reb Chaim Shmuel Levitz, who was the Rosh Yeshiva of the Mir Yeshiva, Paskin, he made halachically decided it's such an important thing to daven in the minyan, right? We know that for a man above the age of bar mitzvah, even just before bar mitzvah, should make a point of davening in a minyan with 10 other males above the age of 13, right? And people go to their way; they'll go miles to make it to minyan, because it's such an important halacha. You have much more koyach for your tefillah to reach Shemayim with 9 other people davening Shmoneh Esrei than you do davening by yourself, even if you have more kavanah inside the house. So if you have to, you have to. Moshe Feinstein really questioned doing it at all these days, because of people's kavanahs now it's supposed to be, or used to be. So it's important. It's hugely important. But learning Seder, especially at the Mir, right, the central point of all learning Torah in the world for the most part, Lakewood, other places like that, in Gateshead, right, but the Mir in Yerushalayim, and it's Israel. If a person, for some reason, did not get to go to Mincha before learning Seder began at 3 o'clock, let's say, Reb Chaim Shmuel said, even though there's a shtibel right next door, and there was lots of them for that matter, you just walk in and catch a minyan, be done in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, come back, and you get a minyan. He said, no. The Seder was so important that you daven mincha in your place where you're supposed to be learning, instead of going to shtibel and daven with a minyan. That's how important, because the Yetzer Hara uses the lack of kaviyas, the lack of steadiness, the lack of consistency to chip away the person spiritually. When it comes to materialism, he's open. You can do whatever you want, whenever you want to do it. You call a person up at 10 o'clock at night. Hey, you want to go for a hamburger? Oh, sure, why not? It's like, I was about to go to bed, but let's go for hamburger. It's like, people stay up at night to watch movies, 2 o'clock in the morning, still watching, so their eyes are, can't stay open. When it comes to materialism and gashmias, the Yetzer Hara is open to all kinds of possibilities. When it comes to spiritual things, no. It will do whatever it can to block a person. And one of the ways you fight the Yetzer Hara is by having a kaviyas, by learning Torah. So it's a hugely important thing that they ask you about on Yom Adin. Did you take the time to establish the time to learn Torah and stick to that schedule? Even if it's just 15 minutes a day, but the same 15 minutes a day. It's a double mitzvah. There's a mitzvah to learn Torah, but there's a mitzvah to establish the time to learn the Torah. So you're getting two mitzvahs at the same time. One, for the Torah you're actually learning, which you could do any time of the day. But the second, because you're doing it at a time that you established for Torah. It's like the same thing. When people have an appointment and they keep the appointment, it means the other person's important. So if you're keeping your appointment with Torah, it shows how seriously you take Torah. The third one, is did you have children, right? Privya, which of course doesn't mean you can't. God forbid a person can't have children for whatever reason. That's not against the mitzvah, as long as a person did everything within their power to have children. Men, by the way, women not necessarily so. Women does not have an obligation to get married or have children. They have what's called a heksher mitzvah, meaning that because it basically takes a man and a woman to get married and have children. So therefore, by getting married, today, of course, women don't look at it any differently. They want to get married. He wants a wife, she wants a husband, and they meet and they go and shidduchim and they get married. They don't, children's of course part of the picture, and it's always an important part of a Torah lifestyle, and a lot of pride, a lot of pleasure, hopefully, and not too much pain along the way. But technically speaking, the halach itself, only the man has the mitzvah to have children. Why not the woman too? Because it's dangerous. Perhaps less so today than before in the past, but some people still do die in childbirth, unfortunately, Islam. But certainly in the old days, it was much more dangerous to give birth, and because it was a life-threatening thing to do. So therefore, the Torah didn't command women to actually do it. The only time we're ever commanded to give up our lives or risk our lives is to sanctify the name of Hashem, if necessary, in certain circumstances. So then, the mitzvah is to do that, but not when it comes to everyday things like having a family. So therefore, if she chooses to do it, it's at her own risk, and she's praised for it, and she gets reward for it. That's the third. That's the third one. The fourth one is a little bit unusual. That's the one we're talking about today. Tzipis Yeshua, the Gemara says, or more like a question mark. Tzipis Yeshua. Did you anticipate? Did you look forward? The tzipot is to look, to look forward to something, to look down the road, so to speak. To look, you're looking for something to come. So Tzipis Yeshua wasn't in the mechakim. Did you wait for the gula? That's one. That's one mitzvah. But this is Tzipis Yeshua. Did you actually anticipate? Now, when you anticipate something, it's a whole different mentality. If you anticipate going to the airport later today, then you start to prepare in advance. If you anticipate a check coming in, you start looking for it before it gets there. If you're in anticipation of something, you can't wait for it to happen, and you do whatever you can to speed up the process, or at least be involved in it the entire time. So Tzipis Yeshua means that you have to want to you want the gula to come so badly that you're looking for it, not just waiting for it. You're looking for it. You're looking forward to it, and you're looking to see the signs if it's coming, because that's what we're supposed to do. It's one of the 6 questions they ask you. The 5th question is that did you learn something? Davar toch davar. Did you not only just learn Torah, but did you think into it to try to understand the reasons behind it, see any insights and ideas you could extract from it? And the 6th one, I forget off the top of my head right now, but I think it's also Torah related too. But those are the 6 questions. 5.5, and you can see them in the Gemara in Shabbos Lamed Aleph, Lamed Aleph, Amud Aleph, where it talks towards the bottom of the page there. But the one that concerns us is the piece of Shuv, this anticipating the redemption. So Rabbi Chetzkel Levenstein, who is he was the Mashgiach Ruchani of the Mir Yeshiva in Poland prior to World War II. Then, of course, the Nazis in Achim Zacharam, they came in, destroyed everything, forcing as many people as possible to leave the Mir Yeshiva and travel across Russia, eventually to Kobe, Japan, where the Japanese, of course, kicked them out after, and they were forced to settle in Shanghai, where they settled the war, set up a makeshift Mir Yeshiva, and kept Torah alive as much as possible until the war was over. And when the war was over, they had to decide whether to go to America or to go to Eretz Yisrael. Going back to Europe was forget it. That was not supposed to happen. So the question was whether to go to America. Rabbi Cutler went to America, and he began Lakewood Yeshiva and worked with Rav Moshe Feinstein to build up Orthodox Jewry there. Legendary stories. Actually, was reading a book on Shabbos about his life and he himself, an absolute extraordinary individual. It's very hard to read all these books all in one sitting. Aside from the fact they're not short books, but it's just so hard to be in the presence of so much greatness, word after word after word, just like push you down more and more and more. But it's still great to see, great to read, and to see what the glory of Torah can look like. But anyhow, so he went to America. It's an interesting story about him doing that, but that's not for now. And the Rav Chesed Levenstein, he went there to Israel instead, and he became the Meshgiach Ruchani of the Mir Yeshiva in Yerushalayim, and also a Panovich in Bnei Brak, two famous yeshivas this very day. And his Musar Shmuzim were legendary, to the point that they put them in Sfarim, and the Sfarim are called Or Yechezkel. And within Or Yechezkel is a section called Emunas Agula. It's actually the one on Amuna, and one of the sections is called Emunas Agula, the Emuna of redemption, where he addresses the issue of Tzipis Yeshua. And he brings down there what's from the Sefer Smak, which is Sefer Mitzvah Katan. That's the Smak is a Samach Mem Kuf, which is a Roshi Tevas, an acronym for Sefer Mitzvah Katan. It's a lot easier to say it. And he's famous. He explains the 613 mitzvahs. That's what the Sefer is all about, and how to do them. And he asked the question on this mitzvah, right? He says, the mitzvah Tzipis Yeshua, where does it come from? Because if you look into the Taryag Mitzvot, you look at the Rishima, right, the whole list of the 613 mitzvahs, and even though there's some discrepancy between the Ramban and the Rambam, exactly, both of them do not bring down Tzipis Yeshua as one of the Taryag Mitzvot. So if we're calling it a mitzvah, and it's not one of the Taryag Mitzvot, it means it must be a subset of one of the 613. And now the question becomes, which one? So the Smak, right, he brings down, it's actually the mitzvah, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. It's the first of the 10 Commandments, the fundamental of the fundamentals of the fundamentals of Torah. This is where this seemingly, obscure mitzvah of anticipating redemption comes from. This hugely important mitzvah called Anochi Hashem Elokecha, the first of the 10 Commandments. How do you see that, right? How do you get to that? So he says, because the fact that it mentions that I took you out of Mitzrayim, that part clues you in. How? Why? Because why mention it? So we had other explanations why. But he says the reason why it's mentioned, because God is saying to the Jewish people in this mitzvah, he's saying that I want you to recall, you saw me take you out of Mitzrayim. You know I promised Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov I would do it, and you saw it happen. You witnessed. You're alive today because of it. So I came through. But I want you to learn from this for the future. That just as I kept my word and redeemed you from Egypt back then, I want you to believe and know and anticipate that I will do it again one final time. Later on in history, the final redemption, I will come through once again, no matter what happens. Thousands of years may pass, and they have. And there could be Romans and pogroms and crusades and even a Holocaust and October 7th, or whatever, all these things have happened to the Jewish people along the way. Nevertheless, it does not mean that I have forgotten about you, or that I'm not keeping my promise. It's taking a little bit longer than perhaps you want and would hope, but it's down to the last second. I am building towards that final redemption. And that's part of the mitzvah. Tzipis Yeshua comes from that mitzvah. So Rav Chesed Levenstein, he says, based upon this revelation, he said, boy, you have to now look at that mitzvah of Tzipis Yeshua a lot differently, he says. Because before, it's like, yeah, I do, maybe I don't, I wasn't raised that way, and, everyone knows Mashiach comes, will come, but in the meantime, I'm very happy where I am, where I'm learning, in New Jersey or New York, or Toronto or England or, London, And when Mashiach comes, we'll all go, right? But do you anticipate every single day that that's going to happen? Are you looking forward to it? Are you feeling a lack? If you're waiting for that check and the check doesn't come, you go to the mailbox, another day has gone by and the check is not in the mailbox, you walk back to your house disappointed. There's something missing. Okay, maybe tomorrow. B'ezras Hashem. And it's all Gamzela Tova. But it's missing. If you're expecting someone to meet you for lunch, right? And you're looking at your watch and now 5 minutes late, 10 minutes late, and all of a sudden you get a phone call saying, I'm so sorry. I was going to be there and I really planned it. I was looking forward to it, but the last second this thing came up. I thought I could deal with it. I can't. Now it's getting so late and I can't make it. You forgive the person. You understand. They have a good reason not to come. It wasn't their fault per se, but it doesn't mean you don't walk away disappointed. Something is missing. You can order a steak, a glass of wine, have a wonderful lunch without them, but it's not the same thing because you were anticipating having lunch together. If you didn't want to have lunch with them, then you're better off. But that's not usually the case. And that's what it means, the peace of Yeshua. That's what it says. So he says, if you're not feeling that, if you're not doing that, if this is not your mentality, your consciousness, he says, according to the Smak, you're not fulfilling the mitzvah of Anochi Hashem Elokecha completely. He says, we talk about Hashem being the Bara Olam who made Ma'aseh Bereshis and did all this, the sun, the moon, the stars, and everything, and Hashgacha Pratis, but when it comes to Mashiach, he says, and to Chiyas HaMesim, messianic type things, we don't talk about them. We just leave them off the agenda, as if we're embarrassed to talk about them. He says, and we do that, you're not doing the mitzvah properly. Not just the mitzvah tzipis of Yeshua, but you're not doing the mitzvah either of Anochi Hashem Elokecha, the first of the 10 commandments. That is serious. It's hugely serious. He says it gets even worse. Right? You might want to get a cup of coffee at this point. He says it gets even worse. He says, you look at the Shemona Esrei. The Shemona Esrei mentions to Tekap a shofar, go El Yisrael, right? All these messianic things in the Shemona Esrei. You're davening brochas that have to do with redemption specifically. He says, if you're not a person who's a piece of Yeshua, then it's as if you're making a brocha levatala, l'shav. It's chitzoni. You're saying the brocha because you have to, but you don't mean it. So therefore, it's as if you're not really asking for it. In which case, it's a brocha levatala. You don't need to make you have to make the brocha. The answer is not to make the brocha because chazal and betaka. That's the Shemona Esrei. The answer is get the right mentality and align your heart properly that you can actually have those brochas with the proper kavanah, because it's a mentality. It takes time to build up. It's all part of the first commandments. And he says, not only that, he says, but let's go back in time. What happened in Mitzrayim? We spoke about this last week, right? Mitzrayim, even though we don't talk about them, and if you don't know about it, it's easy to miss it. And if you do know about it, it's easy to just gloss over it. But it's a huge thing. It's huge. I mean, huge. I can't tell. We lost 6 million Jews, half the Jewish population. And we still haven't recovered, if we really ever will recover, except maybe later on in the future, we see them all again. They all reincarnated, and everyone's like, the world to come, and the Holocaust is a forgotten memory. But in the meantime, we haven't recovered from the Holocaust. It's still there. The world has. They moved on and forgot about it, just let it all happen all over again. But the Jewish people, not so much. And he says that the reason, in Mitzrayim, it was worse. They didn't lose 6 million people. They didn't lose half the population. They lost 12 million people. 4/5 of the Jewish population at that time in Mitzrayim died in the plague of darkness. And he says, why? He says, we know why. Rashi brings it down. The Medrash says it quite clearly. Because they didn't want to leave Egypt. They were not mitzapa Yeshua. Right? They weren't interested in redemption. They didn't want to go with Moshe Rabbeinu. They wanted to stay Mitzrayim. Why not? The place is falling apart. There's no longer a threat. and we can just take over, and we can have money, wealth, and we can live in the place we actually built. So they died in the plague of darkness. And he says, the same way that redemption required the Jewish people to want to leave, to yearn to leave, to look forward to leaving. And if you didn't survive. He says, likewise, the final redemption. The Gemara in Sanhedrin discussing this whole thing about how many people actually survived from those who were in Mitzrayim in Egypt and actually survived to go to Eretz Israel. Only 2 people, Caleb and Yeshua, of that group. Others came around. The women, many survived because they didn't get involved in the spies or other things. And and elderly, most of them probably died. But anyhow, kids were just still young. But of the 600,000 men between 20 and 60, the time they left Mitzrayim, only 2 survived. The rest died either in Egypt in the plague of darkness. They died from the spies every Tisha B'av. He says this. The Gemara says, after making this whole calculation and makes this point, V'hamar Rava, and Rava says, V'chein Yemosim Mashiach. And that's how it's going to be also in the Messianic era. Which one he's talking about? Well, we've only had one. It's the final one, right? There's been no Messianic era to speak of, right? As long as there's still exile possibilities, it's not the Messianic era. Even though if a Messiah type person shows up, like a Bar Kochba, for example, it could be, but didn't. It never panned out. On the contrary, it went the other direction in the end. But the real Messianic era, that's the one we're in right now, at the end of history. How do we know that? Well, we've made the calculation before, and we've spoken about it in the past, about Techis and Mesim and the Cheshbon from the Leshem. But there's one more particular point that we need to make to show that's really an amazing thing. And I can't say it's an absolute sign because who knows? We don't have a prophet that tells, what you got over there, that's 100% true. You should know that God said that, but we only have a shkacha pratis. And the truth is that it takes too long to explain right now. So, B'ezrat Hashem, we will start off with that next week and finish this discussion then. So until then, have a Shabbat Shalom, and we should be zeichet to see all the rest of the hostages come home, B'ezrat Hashem, as Mr. Shamroth usually would tell you, and that we should be blessed to not have to go through any more distress and difficulties with the world around us, the immediate one, and they want to beyond that, and just finally be able to become Mashiach without any more suffering. Shabbat Shalom.